People of the world, welcome back. Have you been craving content from Send It Rising? I know you have. Don't lie to me. I know you're interested and engaged. Here's the thing, based on what I'm about to say, you're going to know what kind of show it is today. I don't believe in coincidences. Yeah, you know, we got a guest. I don't. Just because the world seems random, just because we don't understand it with our monkey brains, doesn't mean that the people that enter into our life are there like a roulette table or some other, which is probably also not random. Let's be honest. And so we find ourselves in these relationships. The fact that you're listening to this right now is not chaotic. You are meant to hear these particular words. Why is it do that you want to learn and understand from a guru of podcasting? I don't know, audience listener. I don't know why your car has the tire light thing that you can't figure out to turn off and that you've got 3/4 of a tank. I don't know why these things are happening to you, but they are. And because they are, you know that you are in the right place. I am stoked to have this particular guru on the show today. Why? Because in 2022, if you throw a stick 9 out of 10 times, you will hit someone who has a podcast. That 10th time, you're going to hit someone who wants to have a podcast. It's the pandemic, people. We're all doing this thing. Reels are super exciting for podcast promotion. I have about 1 billion questions. Our guest today is the king of podcasting, as far as I'm concerned. How do I know he's the king? Because I said so on the thumbnail. That's how you know, ladies and gentlemen, the man himself. He's going to blow your mind not once, not twice, but thrice. Todd Cochrane.
Oh my goodness. Now that, my friend, is an intro for the ages. And if you do this for every show, holy smokes, good for you.
I'm stoked. I'm stoked. So I'm going to dive right in because I have a little bit of podcasting experience. So this is a question for me. Sorry, listener. I think that reels are a really strong way to promote a podcast. You do a podcast, you cut them up into these reels, short form video, YouTube shorts. Is that a good strategy in your opinion?
Our social team, I personally don't do reels because I'm not a big Instagram guy. Of course, you can do reels other places now too, but I think they're very, very effective. We've used them within the company ourselves to promote our own shows, stuff that's going on. Reels are fun. They're quick. You don't waste any time. It's kind of like the TikTok. You're on for 30, 60 seconds and boom, you're off to something else. So yeah, I think reels are really effective.
So what else should we be doing to promote this podcast? Should we be going door to door, knocking and say, "Hey, I'm here to talk to you about some religion," and then psych and say it's actually for my podcast? Is that a good marketing strategy, or should we do something else?
Well, I always tell podcasters, podcasting's not enough. You just can't record the show and be done. You can't put it out there and publish. I've got a list literally in my head of things that podcasters can do. Obviously, sustain superior content, consistency, having your own website, getting interviews on the radio, getting interviews on the TV, attend events where your people for your show hang out, maybe even start speaking locally or nationally. Join a podcast network, connect with companies, leverage your audience, have them help you on social and all these other things. And maybe even take all the content you're getting in your podcast and write a book. There is so much more you can do besides Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. All these things are like someone's going, oh my God, I got to do all this. No, they
Mhm.
don't. But I think over time, pieces of that can really help a podcast grow. You know, it's a series of things, and probably there's 20 other things I didn't even talk about that are out there that you can do to help a show grow.
So I want to fish for an anecdote that you have in your repertoire of anecdotes about a podcast that started from nothing. Well, they all start from nothing, don't they?
Sure.
And then it became something pretty cool. Walk me through how that happened.
Well, I'll just give you a personal show. You know, I started blogging, and I was not a good blogger. And I think maybe a couple hundred people came to the website a month or a week. You know, it wasn't great. It's a tech blogger, and I heard about this thing called podcasting. I love to talk, like to have fun, tell jokes, just have a good time. And this thing went like a rocket ship. And I was like, what's this? And it ultimately ended up leading to a whole life changing series of events. and you just never know where podcasting can lead you. It may be the goal of your podcast is just to build authority. Maybe it's to have a funnel. Maybe it's to get engagement with other people. Maybe you're just bored, you know? So there's lots of reasons people do podcasts, but for me, starting my show was really I had no idea and nary a clue where it was going to go. Book deal, podcast Hall of Fame. I don't want to brag, but it's just all this stuff happened by sitting out there and putting content out a couple times a week.
Yeah, I feel like the main driving motivator for me is so that my head gets so big it doesn't fit through doorways anymore.
Right.
That's just me. I don't know what motivates different people. Um, so look, I think most people who start a podcast have fantasies of it doing really well
Yeah.
and getting a lot of. Is there a dark side to that when things start getting popular and all of a sudden you're like, oh no, like I have an audience, I have to entertain these people, and I have to be consistent now, and I'm feeling anxious and this sort of dread of continuing to be popular. Do you ever had that experience or know anyone who did?
Well, I think if you're people usually ride the wave. If something has become successful and they're growing an audience, generally I see podcasters get very excited about that.
Mm,
The opposite is more closer to the truth often. They're struggling to grow an audience, and they're working hard to grow an audience. And it's again, it's this grind to put out episodes and create great content. But when people find success, I think that it can really motivate them. It can be life changing. It really can, and there will be obviously pressure to put stuff out. For the first probably 5 years of doing my personal show, I didn't take a break, and that was purely because I had to eat, and, if I didn't do the show, I didn't eat, I didn't pay the bills, so, for me, it was a job, but it was a job that I loved doing, not one that I was drugged by my heels to go to. It was something that I wanted to do, so I think it really depends on where your level of success is and what that commitment means.
yeah, I keep thinking about my sister who creates 3 to 4 TikToks, Instagrams a day
Wow.
to keep, Chelsea Smith Cosmetics and all of her employees employed.
Right.
And she literally will have a TikTok that goes really well, and then she'll double her sales that month, or she'll have a month where the TikToks don't go so well, and
Mhm.
they won't.
Yep.
And I think about that, and I'm like, "Whoa." I
That
mean, big
that's big
business
pressure.
lease. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's big pressure. And I think the beauty about podcasting, though, is generally we are individuals that are talent. We are the GM, we're the promoter, we're social. Not a lot of podcasters have big teams. So sometimes a
Mm.
lot of work is put upon one person. I know for years I had no help doing my show. And 5 years ago, so I hired someone to help me do show prep. I thought, oh my God, I get 2 hours of my life back twice a week because I found the right person to help me with that process. I pay for that person, but it was after 11 years of doing it myself because I couldn't afford to pay someone to do it.
Yeah. I just saw Ed Bernstein talk, and he is a very famous Las Vegas lawyer. He was the first lawyer to do a number of things. First lawyer to run his ads in Spanish. First lawyer to have African Americans in an ad. First lawyer to sponsor the penalty box in the NHL. And in my head, all these lawyers are working with big fancy agencies, and that's how they're getting these ideas. He didn't have one. Never has. He's like, "We tried them a couple times, but they just not our thing." And they keep it internal, and they come up with these really clever forward-thinking marketing ideas, and I've done so for years, So, pretty incredible, what an owner of a company can do if they just put their head down and think it through.
And I think it's the same in podcasting. When before I had a business, well, the business and my podcast has always been separated. So I had to build the podcast while I was building the business. So I would spend an inordinate amount of time working to build the show. And again, it was really the goal where was to keep the monetization rolling at the time because that was basically I was told, this thing's gotta make money or you're done in 2 years. That was put down by my wife. So so for me, some people wanna monetize in episode 3, and I was like, "If I can get if I can get this thing monetized in 2 years, I'm gonna
Mm,
be I'll be happy," So
sure.
it was a little different perspective, a little different pressure.
Yeah, isn't that wild? If you could go back, and change anything or go back and create an alternate timeline, in regards to podcasting, is there anything you'd do?
Personally, no. For the company, yes. I would do well, if I knew the future, I'd have
Sure.
done a couple things. One of the things that we early on, we were solely focused on podcast advertising. And at a certain point, the money rolled out of the small shows into the big shows about the time Adam Carolla came on the scene. And that
Mhm.
money never came back down. So if I was to, and so what we did is we pivoted and we became a service company. So my thought process now, knowing what has progressed, is we would have invested a lot more in making sure we kept the sales team up and running to to keep up with that wave of money that would have come in. And but my goal's always been to help content creators succeed in whatever their goal for their show is. And for a lot of shows, about 50% of shows, it's they definitely want to make some money. And some of them may would just want car money or house money or whatever it may be, certain different levels. I'm just happy if we can get the new podcaster, get them a check to take somebody out to dinner, and that's a start. At least it's something tangible they can hold in their hands and see what this did, and then ultimately we can get them to life changing money.
Wow, that's incredible. And guiding someone through that process is going to be different for each individual, obviously.
Yeah.
When you're in the sales cycle, I assume it's not you, but maybe it is that's talking to potential new folks that are going to work with you.
Well, it's so we are a full service provider. Most of our customers that come into us come in via the web, and we have no interaction with them until they get
Mm,
their show up and running.
mm.
And then I'm basically going out and sampling all the new shows on a regular basis. But the businesses that we work with, whether it be a professional or a company that's trying to figure out what podcasting will do for them, how they can build a branded show and have something successful to reach the message. The pandemic really changed everything because businesses were doing almost all the social stuff already. And then when the pandemic hit, everyone went home and they're like, how do we reach these people if we're not on? So they either start a YouTube channel or they started a podcast, or maybe they did both
That's right.
to be able to reach those audiences. Some did it well, some did it pretty badly. But, I think the podcasting space was transformed largely during the pandemic because a lot more people came in to do content because what else do we have to do? We're sitting around, we weren't driving to soccer matches anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think humanity fundamentally shifted.
Oh, I
I
believe so.
think education will be forever changed,
Mhm.
because we know we can do remote learning. It sucks. It's not as good,
Right.
but for some people, it's better, and they just stayed. They're like, you know what? We actually like this. We prefer it. Homeschooling will be completely different moving forward. We have the technology now. Internet speeds are strong.
Yep.
I think residential real estate is gonna a lot of people
Oh,
think it's gonna drop, but it's a lot. I mean, everyone needs home offices now. So
eh
many remote workers. They want the 4,000 square foot big house because mom and dad are working from
yep.
home, or mom's working, or dad's work, or whatever. And,
Commercial real estate's gonna be devastated, and it already is.
commercial.
Yeah, I'm paying for a 5,000 square foot office we use once a week. So it's,
Whoa.
when my lease comes up, I'm out, I'm gone. We're gonna go
Right.
do something else. We're gonna use a WeWork or something. We're not gonna
I
go back.
mean, if you take that's the wildest thing. Commercial real estate prices, for those of you listening that have never done like SIDS and LIDs and a 3-year lease on a commercial term, it's always like ridiculous. And you go, I have to spend how much for what? And then you do it because that's what you're supposed to do. And now you have commercial space.
And the contract's this thick. So
Unreal.
right.
And then if you take that same 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 that you're spending on commercial or more, and you go buy a house, you're living like Floyd Mayweather. You take up, $6,000 a month. You could live in this
Uh,
mansion.
for my company, it's another employee. Low
Sure.
level employee, but it's another
Mm.
employee.
That's right.
So we may give up some performance by not all being at the office because some people perform at different levels. But yeah, I think the workplace has been changed completely. And guess what? It gives us more time to spend with our families, maybe watch another YouTube video, listen to podcasts. It gives us this little, because we're not in the car, we're not driving an hour. When I was living in Hawaii, I spent 3 hours a day in my car. It was insane.
It's absolutely insane. I've said it before in the show, but it bears repeating that I don't know, 200 years from now, they're gonna look back and go, "This was the generation that died getting a cup of coffee." You
Right.
just didn't know if that was gonna be your day. You really wanted that Starbucks or now you're paralyzed because you wanted Starbucks. It's
Right.
just
That's
absolutely
that's an
barbaric.
interesting analogy there. That's a good one.
And so I made a song for TikTok called "Work from Home Revolution," and it's a metal song because I'm very passionate about it. I mean, because I talked to a personal injury lawyer and I was actually saddened to hear him say that if a company demands that workers come back, that it would be difficult to sue them in the event of a fatal crash or paralysis or some car accident related injury. Because I think that there's something there. I think that there's a precedent that could be set if, XYZ Fortune 500 company
Mm.
forces them back. Okay,
I could have been I could have been home instead of in my car. So
I
that's
proved to you I could do it from home for 2 years,
right, and you made me come back to the
and you
office.
forced me, like, I didn't, you know what I mean? And
Mm,
so now I'm whatever, XYZ injury, so you're paying,
yeah,
I feel like that's coming. I could be wrong.
that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that angle, but I think you might be right.
So anyway, you've got how much more time do you have on your lease before you're done?
I think 2 years. So, yeah, gonna pay the bill, and because breaking the lease is as expensive as, you just might as well terminate it normally. So,
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So, to those folks out there that have a podcast with low viewers, right?
yep.
And they've been doing it for a while and it's just not getting any traction. What's your recommendation?
Well, really focus on that content. You have to put out, and in this day and age, you have to put out really great content, and you have to be focused, and I'm not saying you have to edit this thing to death. It just has to be engaging. Don't waste the listener's time. Make sure that you're providing them meat on the bone to be able to chew on while you're going through this, because you wanna keep them to the point where they're still kinda leaning in. If they start leaning back, then you need to exit. You need to finish that episode up and get out. You don't wanna waste people's time. I've been blamed on my personal show for doing too much personal talk in the beginning, but I've been doing this so long, that's the format of the show, and the people that hang
Mhm,
out, they're part I call them part of my family. Um, that's a big piece of it, but I think the mistake a lot of podcasters make and is they don't visualize the impact they're having. So
mhm,
I always make a note to say, okay, I know what my audience size is. And whether that's a room full of people, it could be small gymnasium full of people, whether it may be, whatever that size is. Let's say it's 1,000. If you can visualize that there's 1,000 people sitting in front of you right now live, then you'll be a little more serious in making sure that you get your point across, you have good production, you have good content, because you don't want to take the audience for granted. And I think a lot of podcasters do, and audiences can feel that. So even if you've got 10, 50, 100, whatever the number is, listeners per episode, if you can visualize they're sitting in front of you or across from you in a big table, then I think it drives you to make better content and be more careful in the words that you say. And at the same time, you know, enjoy them as your company and have a good time with it. Don't be boring. Maybe do a little comedy a little once in a while in your episode. Uh,
Speaking of which, got a shout out to those one guy, one of my chess followers from back in the day when I was streaming chess. Thanks for the comments and chat, buddy. Appreciate you. Um, yeah, here's the thing. I have been terrified of public speaking, just like everyone else. I don't know. Maybe
Mhm.
there's some psychopaths out there that just love it. Who get up there and are just like, "This is the greatest thing ever," when they're in 7th grade. But I think
Right.
most of us pop up there and just it's absolutely just horrifying, you know? You know what? It's so funny. I have somewhat of a like a tragic memory. I was in 3rd grade and I had a teacher that I was not a big fan of, and I got a book signed. And I went up to her and I was like, "See, I got the book signed by the author." And she's like, "Come to the front of the class right now and tell everyone," you know? And I'm like,
Oh.
"Ugh," you know?
G
Yeah, it was so bad. I was absolutely shook to my core, to have to do this. Um,
But the best
and
thing is you can imagine they're here, they're not actually here, so you've got that out.
So this is my so echoing what you're saying, it's like since then, I gave a keynote. They paid me $6,000 to give a 90-minute speech to a Canadian steel conglomerate, and the CEO he just mean mugged me. He just closed his arms and and just looked at me like, What are you gonna do?" You know what I mean? And so I don't know. That feeling, that's an interesting thing to
Yeah,
kind of push through. So I recommend podcasters go do some public speaking to
absolutely.
feel that sort of horrifying anxiety and then go, you know what? It's not too bad. I can get over this.
The first time I got paid to speak, I went out to Vegas and talked in front of, Cook County basically all the teachers in Cook County. So it was a pretty big crowd. A little
Yeah.
intimidating, right? I didn't
Yeah.
start with the Lions Club. I started with 3,000 Cook County teachers. So yeah, that was probably not the initial step to take. So, but now it's if there's 3,000, I'm good. But yeah, that was a big gulp because then you're like, am I really prepared to speak to 3,000 people? So I think if you take that attitude with your show,
Yeah.
am I prepared to talk to 100, 200, 300 people?
Yeah, isn't that so wild that
It is.
some evolutionary, I don't know, psychological, sociological reason why we just panic and we when we want to bring our absolute top A game to impress these
We we
people.
we don't wanna look stupid.
Ah, and the quantity of people makes a huge difference. I remember
Yeah.
we were playing basketball once at my old company, and we're all, playing whatever, and then there's this cute girl, she, came out and, just sat on the stairs, and all of a sudden, everybody is just throwing elbows, and it's, like, the whole end of the world, we're all trying to impress this girl, it's
Right,
ridiculous.
right. I was out in, Trenton, New Jersey this past weekend. It was a small group, about 80 people, and I was talking about podcast statistics. And it's a pretty boring topic. You really have to get creative to entertain someone for 30 minutes about metrics. But I was basically using it to talk to them the same about here's what's usable for you to help you grow and things not to pay attention to and get wrapped around the axle with and had a great time with that audience. And it's sometimes those little close, intimate conversations are better than the big ones because you feel like you're really touching somebody individually, whereas there's this big group. And so that's the challenge with a podcast too. If you have a big audience, you have to really, 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 really work hard to make it personal so that they
Mm.
feel they're sitting there. You got to remember you're in their head, so, because they're wearing earbuds, you got a direct connection to their brain. So you have to be cognizant that you're while you're talking to a group, you're talking to one. And I think if you remember that it's a big audience, but you're talking to one, you can find that match. That's where the magic happens.
Oh, absolutely. It's funny that you mentioned that because those one guy who's in chat right now talking about a group of friends of his that started a podcast and they had a streamer that gets more views and he's leaving these comments as we're talking. And when I was streaming chess, I used to stream for 5 hours and I'd be talking to him the whole time. That's all I would do is talk to the folks that would hop on and I developed relationships with them
You're
over
right.
time. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, hey, it's World Chess Scientist. Oh, hey,
Yeah.
and that's sort of the magic of live that I've been really trying to
Hmm.
harness over this experiment. This
Sure.
we're on episode 415 or something with
Yeah.
this
You're
show. I
past
mean,
you're past the experiment.
we're just going. And I think that live is going to get really interesting. And it already is.
Sure
All
is.
of these platforms are trying to follow in the footsteps of Twitch because Twitch monetized. They found a
Hmm.
way to get subscribers to these streamers, and now all the platforms are desperately trying to get these major streamers onto their platforms because they know how much money is in it for them.
So I started streaming live because I was bored. I was doing my show in Honolulu at 8 p.m. in the evening, Hawaiian Standard Time, 2 o'clock in the morning on the East Coast, 11 on Pacific. And I'd have New Zealanders and Australians coming in, listen to the show and dogging me in chat. But it was enough of a back and forth. There was enough interactivity there that it really, because I do a solo show. So it's just me, and then I'm not talking to somebody else. So it was one of those situations where there was just enough interaction to keep it interesting to get me past boredom, because not always do the audience send an email. Matter of fact, a couple weeks ago, I said to my husband, the email's been a little low lately. You guys don't love me no more. And, kind of teased them a little bit, and that kickstarted a little bit of email again. But it can get lonely doing podcasts because people are used to consuming, just like TikTok, boom, boom, boom. You might heart it or you might make a comment, but a lot of podcast listeners are listening when they don't have a computer or maybe their phone or doing something else on their phone. So I think that you have to be really work hard to get that engagement, and that engagement sometimes better than money. The engagement keeps you motivated to keep doing the show because you're touching people.
That's a great point. I mean, and for a lot of these, I think for a lot of folks, what they tend to do is they start with a podcast or they get popular on Reels or social in some way, and then they go live. And I'm going live now over and over and over again. And then I started creating YouTube content that is just specific keyword stuff because I'm realizing that like the live is putting cart before the horse most of the time, is because people will take an established audience and then they'll go live with that audience.
Right,
That's
right.
usually
That's
the
what I
way it's
did.
done.
That's yeah.
Yeah. But I'm very stubborn. So I'm just plowing forward. And now I'm learning things from some of these guests. I have the founder of Green Pal, which is basically like Uber for lawn care.
Mhm.
This dude's
Yep.
super rich. His name's Brian. He's incredible. He spliced up our interview. He's 250 likes, 300 likes on every splice of that interview. And so I've got a treasure trove of these
Sure.
interviews just sitting there waiting. Um, and I've learned that Pinterest idea pins, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook business and personal, Twitter, LinkedIn, and like some other ones I can't remember, YouTube shorts. You can all post short form video there. It's like 11 platforms. It's so many. And that's where I'm actually getting traction. Like I'm getting
That
at least 1,000 on every Facebook
wow,
reel.
that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's like this is almost, it's because I'm doing it backwards. So we will have some nuggets during this conversation that are worthy of 60 seconds.
Right.
And that's what I'm trying to pull out of you. Does that make sense? It's like
Yeah,
a different way of going about it.
it does, and, it's interesting because I've always laughed because my audience now is split. Well, I don't laugh, but it's interesting fact. My personal audience split 70/30, 70% listen, 30% watch, and you can see my background here on what I have in the studio. I'm like, "Why do they watch the podcast?" And then sure, I put up a screenshot of a website or something, but it's really boils down to 2 things. Some people like to listen, some people like to watch.
Mhm.
And we learn differently. Sometimes you go to the doctor's office. What's your better way to read? Do you learn? Do you read? Do you listen? Do you like to watch? So it's the same thing. They figured that out that people have a different way that they engage. So I'm not surprised now that 30% watch but it still baffles my mind just a little bit. But I understand why.
Yeah, I said something just the other day, where I was talking to someone and I said, "Oh, I know you're not watching this. I know you're clicking on other tabs and you're doing this and that and whatever." And they're like, "No, I'm not." I'm like, "What? Like
Well,
what?"
that brings a good segue too. You never know who's listening. I mean, I'll give you a little story. Maybe this is your nugget. So it was when the Mac Mini came out, and this Mac Mini that Apple produced, the first one was horrible. And I'm dogging on it. I'm riffing on this Mac Mini. I have nothing good to say about it. It boots up, but I have nothing good to say. And I said, if I just had 15 minutes to talk to Steve Jobs, I'd tell him what I really think about this Mac Mini. About 2 weeks later, my phone rings. Didn't know. It's his secretary. So I got Steve on the line for you. I said, Steve, who? She goes, I have Steve Jobs on the phone for you. I said, you're kidding. She said, no. Clicked over. Todd, Steve, you're on the clock. So we had a conversation for 15 minutes about Now, that to me was like a lifetime conversation, right? Getting to talk to this man, the late Steve Jobs, but it was brought home. He probably didn't listen, but someone in his team said, "Hey, you need to listen to this guy. He's dogging on the Mac Mini," and that ended up resulting in him sending me a MacBook Pro to the Waikiki Apple Store in Honolulu and giving me a MacBook Pro because I hated my Mac Mini so much. And so when you're doing your shows, you might have Steve listening to you or, that type of an analogy. So you just never know who's listening.
That is just so cool. And
It
that
is
is a
cool.
good nugget. That's a good reel right there. I think
Right.
it's probably a minute, probably 90 seconds, if I had to guess, like how long that was. Because now I
Right.
see everything in these, because the different reels have different times that they can
Right.
be.
Right.
And so if you take one and you cut it up, like it works for this one, it works better
Sure.
for this one. You can edit out the ums and the dead space. And I think that you and I can have a really interesting conversation about offering that for people that you work with, because I think that it's going to be the primary driver of audience from this point forward. I
Interesting.
think whether or not the short form video for a podcast does well will have a direct correlation with its popularity and how quickly it grows, et cetera.
Because people's attention spans are really short. They went from 128 to 256 characters on Twitter just so we give us a little more time, but we're just doing we're doing these bites. And, you look at TikTok. TikTok invented a doggone time machine. You sit down with TikTok and it's 9 o'clock. Next thing you know, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. You're like, where did 5 hours go? So we're just, we're feeding that, getting that dopamine hit every 60 seconds. I don't know if it's healthy or not, but at least podcasts, you can settle in for a little while.
I feel like it's the same thing where, if you listen to the radio too much, you'll go insane,
Oh, I I
right?
I cut out mainstream media and most regular radio. Yeah,
Well, I
I
was
can't
I was kind
handle
of
it.
picking on people like 150 years ago. Like, oh, these kids, they never go outside. They sit and listen to the radio. The radio. Can you believe that? They can't even see a face and they know who are these people on the radio. It's always that. And every generation is subject to that. And
That's
I'll be
right,
the
that's
same
right.
way. It's you know what I mean? Like I was told in no uncertain terms that spending 8 hours on a computer was a huge mistake as a kid. They're like, you were spending way too much time playing Diablo 2. Pointing and clicking. What do I do now for a living? I point and I click on a computer for 8
That's
hours a
right.
day, and now I'm being rewarded by society for doing the same thing that I was not supposed to do. Um, okay,
Yeah, just like gaming, that gaming's not gonna pay you nothing, you're wasting your life, and look at some of these big gamers. Of course, it's small
crushing
percent.
it.
Yeah, they're laughing all the way to the bank account.
Yep, or chess. Some of these
Yeah.
chess streamers that didn't become massively popular until the
Wow.
pandemic and all the sports disappeared, and all of a sudden they're like world celebrities.
Man.
We could talk forever and a day. I have to pick up my children. And so, ladies and gentlemen, you know the drill. YouTube.com/, send it rising if you want to see me barefoot longboarding at Send It Rising on TikTok, Instagram. We're all over the place. You know the drill. It's going quite well. I'm very happy about it. Our guest today clearly is the guru of podcasting. You should talk to him. You should listen to his shows. You should do everything I tell you without question. Todd, where should they do these things?
Todd at Blubrry.com to connect directly with me. You can go at Blubrry on Twitter and Blubrry_podcasting on Instagram. Of course, just come over to Blubrry.com. You find everything right there. If you want to get started podcasting, hit the get started button. We'll get you going. But main thing is just hit record, do a show, get out there and get podcasting. Let your message be heard. Doesn't matter what platform you're on. Just let your voice be heard. Thanks so much for having me on.
And that is how you know you're in the presence of a pro. He's said that 7,000 times. So it just spills out so easily. When the pitch is smooth like silk, that's when you know that they've been around the block. Special shout out to those one guy in chat today. Love seeing you there, brother. If you want to join us live, youtube.com/Send It Rising. Thanks, everybody. We'll see y'all next time.